Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review hashtag alive, or number symbol alive, or just really just alive. This is a Netflix film that at the end of the day, it's another zombie movie. We've seen enough of these, but reasonably, this seems to be very much kind of pulled back for the most point. It seems to mostly be about a man's journey to survive when ultimately he otherwise realizes that his apartment complex is run amok with zombies. Eventually, seeming that people have found techniques quickly while being into this zombie apocalypse. I think really a lot of this is very pushing to like the more current generation of people for this zombie film. There was a lot of tech stuff added. There was a lot of just um, overall trying as desperately as possible to feel like a unique movie. But when at the end of the day, I could consistently see the pulling back of budget at points. I could see the overall just like, yeah, this movie kind of really slows down at a lot of points, and then it is just like you kind of almost forget that there's a zombie apocalypse going on until the movie has to remind you there's a zombie apocalypse going on, and then you're like, oh, okay, so this is where the movie picks back up again, and like it's blatantly obvious going into this movie. Yeah, they try to do some cutting edge things to again make this movie as like, hey, yeah, we're gonna throw in some tech stuff here. Oh, hey, yeah, we're gonna try as much as possible to be this different kind of zombie film. But when looking at it, it kind of just isn't as exciting or just as important as a lot of other zombie films, like as a whole. Like there is no quite like I guess a lot of people could like this movie much more than a lot of other zombie movies just because it um is not one of those movies where it kind of is in your face every 5 seconds and is consistently just like whoa, whoa, gore fest or whatever. It very much ties itself on a story about a guy and his neighbor and what is to meet them down below, meaning the the zombies, of course, that are going to eat them alive at some point, but not spoiling anything because maybe they live, maybe they don't live. But going into this movie, I went into this and I kind of felt like we have kind of done everything with zombie movies at this point that looking at this one, I'm not feeling that we're really leaving any stone. It's not like we're trying to reinvent any wheel. We're just going to like be like, well, hey, Train to Busan was a really interesting, creative zombie film, so let's basically do that. Like, let's pretty much just do that film, but in a different kind of circumstance because it's one setting. It doesn't go all over the place, um, and reasonably there is a huge amount of time where I'm just like, why is it that this person has so much time to do this and that and this, but then he doesn't get off his butt and go and try and find things, try and figure out that he could probably do certain tasks and consistently try to survive. It just seems like he's just like, well, I guess I'll just call it quits at some point because I don't want to be a zombie. So, and then eventually, he sees on the other side of his apartment complex a woman that is basically telling him like, dude, don't be stupid. Like come on, like survive in this thing. Like you can make it. Like come on, it's not that hard. And so he's like, you know what? Yeah, it isn't that hard. Maybe I should just like, just actually try to do things and yeah. So we get in this movie where it's kind of blatantly obvious like where the momentum of this entire movie goes. Like it's kind of really telling you like where the beginning and the middle and the end is for this movie, because there's an obvious like, oh hey guys, let's stop here to get all the story out, and then well we gotta wrap this whole thing up. So let's bring those zombies back in and just and wreak havoc. All right. If anything, there could have been a lot more times. Like, you have so many apartment complexes that are going on in this movie. At some point, you could probably have a random person be knocking at this person's door. He opens said door and like, oh hey, I know we don't know one another, but hey, we're neighbors. It seems like you never, um, like did any like loud music or anything like that. Hey, could I just hang in here for like an hour and for me to like call my mom and or try to like or can I just stay here for an hour and then like until my mom comes home and then eventually that mom eventually comes home and then um, she's like, oh, okay, bye. Or something. There could have been like a neighborhood kind of thing. They really could have played on this apartment complex to the T, or ultimately they could have just had more than just really two people at some point in this movie, and they didn't. And recently there was a whole like uh, thing at the end of this movie that I thought was hilariously goofy, where they kind of threw in there at the end of it, like, yeah, we're gonna showcase this at the end of this movie, and I was just like, really? Again, they're really trying as much as possible to be like cutting edge, current. Like, oh, here's how these people made it, or here's how these people died, or oh, here's how these people um, were stupid because they went in to do this, and so, anyways, I think it's about that time to already break into spoiler variation in this movie because there's not much to say because ultimately they're like it's like an exciting beginning and an exciting end, but everything in between that is just like kind of feels like filler or just kind of feels like, oh, this is how we're gonna carry this story more. Okay, all right, kind of. I'm kind of like, yeah, but let's get back to that exciting stuff though. Let's get to the where this guy actually does something, and I was still waiting for that time where that kid was really gonna actually the main character to really do something because movie didn't seem exciting enough. It really didn't. But I don't know. For some people, this might have just been just good enough. So I don't know. Let me know in the comments below if you kind of felt wishy washy about it, or maybe you just thought it was boring, or maybe you hated it, or maybe you didn't watch the whole entire thing because you're just like, man, this is kind of like Paint by Colors, the zombie version, like or Paint by Numbers, not colors. It was kind of a very like modern aged zombie movie, and it seemed just so absurd the things that they did to make this more like uh, a showing of the times. I don't know why. So I think it's about that time to ultimately break into spoiler time. So let's break out the double five because I otherwise have been probably talking way too long about this movie in a cryptic like sense. And people who probably saw this movie ultimately know exactly what I'm talking about. So, spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this movie. So, hashtag alive or alive. We open this movie with a guy waking up. I was like, oh, great. Are we gonna have an entire sequence where he gets up, he scratches his butt, he brushes his teeth, he turns on the TV, and oh, yeah, crap is going on. Things are going sideways. Whoo, Nelly, wow, seems like a crappy day. But what actually happens is this kid is evidently a social media person of sorts, probably a YouTuber, and that becomes very evident eventually in this movie. Reasonably, this guy ultimately seems to, during a zombie apocalypse, this guy has time to make YouTube videos and send them out, and just be like, "Yeah, my life sucks. Zombies, yeah, boo, yeah, boo on zombies, boo on them." Like that's not exactly what he says, but like it seems like he's like vlogging about this zombie apocalypse, and I thought that was such a like. I'm like, yeah, this is such a like a current thing to do. If you're not consistently being attacked by zombies, why not just blog about how your days are going? Like, yeah, I'm starting to run low on food. Yeah, I can't get anywhere because those effing zombies. Boo on them, right? Huzzah for still being alive, though, but boo on zombies. So we we have it to where this kid wakes up and immediately he goes onto his computer and I guess is talking to a lot of his gamer friends or whatever and saying, "Hey, you guys up for Fortnite?" And they're just like, "Hey, haven't you checked the news? It's like, hey, like there's some crazy stuff going out there lately." Yeah, I was like, I really wanted a game today, but then I realized like all the crazy stuff that's going on. And so this guy turns on the news and also kind of watches a lot of I'm assuming social media videos where a lot of people are all of a sudden talking about the this zombie spread, getting to the point where there's one guy with a selfie stick that is like poking out of his apartment building and like really stretching this selfie stick. I would say to call somebody, to Skype someone, because if he was taking a selfie during a zombie apocalypse, good on him. But evidently, he figured out that if he put his selfie stick outside of his apartment building and kind of really like held it out there, that ultimately he could get a signal to call people. And I'm just like, okay, all right, that's a little weird, but I guess it's 2020, right? So they ultimately know that there is seemingly some kind of bizarre outbreak going on, and so reasonably, this guy does of course, the one thing that you would probably do when you would just kind of just see what's going on. Opens up the window, and the window, like, you just kind of see a cluster of just all these zombies just all around this apartment complex. It's crazy. Going into this guy at some point, like zombies start to attempt to try to go through his go into his home. So ultimately, has to put his entire refrigerator in front of his door because a zombie at one point was trying to sneak in, and he had to attack the zombie to try to kill this thing off. We get to the point to where, okay, the very much exciting part is at the very beginning of this, all the vicious attacks and stuff like that. But then again, after that, we get into very much the slower down time where this guy ultimately had gotten almost attacked by a zombie, so he had to shove his fridge in in his door, but then he ultimately eventually realizes that he forgot to go grocery shopping. And he's like, oh crap, I know my mom told me to go grocery shopping, but I didn't think about it. So, kid has no food in the fridge. And so now basically, this guy is slowly but surely starving to death. And because he has no food anywhere, and he's kind of just scraping at the bottom of the barrel of whatever food he has left. And all the while, there's consistent, like, he's trying to figure out where all the zombies are coming from. It seems like, again, it's one of those kind of zombies that attract by noises, to where ultimately you can play around with noises and ultimately get the zombies to go to certain directions where noises are. All the while, this kid at first tries to, like, at first he was gonna, like, do the whole trick that the guy was doing to try to get a phone signal. And then after that, he just tries to take a drone out there to try to get a phone signal to try to call someone, and the drone doesn't quite go the way the drone thing doesn't quite go the way he wants it to. So we eventually have this guy eventually again starving to death. He doesn't want to leave his apartment building because ultimately he assumes that there's zombies at every corner. So we have this kid slowly but surely doing vlogs and social medias, and he just kind of putzes around, and then eventually he decides to end himself by tying some ropes up to the ceiling, and he thinks that he is going to just, like, call it a wrap because he's either going to slowly but surely starve to death or do this because he doesn't want to die by being eaten by zombies. So all the while, he is uh, kind of looking at the other side of his apartment complex and sees a woman there, and this woman is just like, God, you're a moron. And so she, like, tries to convince him to not take his own life. And so eventually within these people, they start to then, they like, he has drones for her, and she sends stuff out to him. She tries to, like, lob things over to his apartment building, and he tries to they really try to keep trying to, like, send things over and this and that to eventually to a point where lobbing things over doesn't go quite all that well. And then there's all of a sudden a zombie that starts, like, grabbing this rope thing that she tried to throw something, and now this zombie is trying to crawl up Batman 1966 style up her apartment complex, and this guy is trying to send a drone to attack this zombie or get close to the zombie, to where the zombie will uh, try to grab this thing or try to just not go up this wall, but the zombie does so anyways. And the girl evidently gets knocked out, and she wakes up and eventually just gets to the point of attacking the zombie to where he falls over, but his hand is still there. Eventually, they get walkie talkies to where they can talk to one another. Evidently, the boy sucks at doing walkie talkies, but it gets to where they now have, like, a lake house conversation. They have these, like, split screens, and it feels like both of them are in the same room together talking to one another, but of course they're not because reasonably they're in two different rooms. But eventually he sends her kind of food and she sends him stuff. It kind of gets to the point where eventually he scavenges and tries to find food for himself because otherwise he's going to starve. So eventually he does go out and tries to uh, find other kinds of food to get and stuff like that. He ultimately sends her like Nutella, and ultimately he's like, "Hey, do you like Nutella?" And she's like, "Man, I could do without it." And he's like, "Man, how does she not like that?" I guess some people don't really care about things, but I guess it's just really just like, well, sucks to be you. Eat whatever to fill up your system because you're gonna run out of food eventually. So going into this, yeah, like basically we get back into the much more exciting part of this film because ultimately, yeah, kind of very long-winded amount of like garbage of like drones and stuff like that, and just kind of like wasn't all that exciting really going on in those portions. It slowed down and just kind of dragged a lot, and it was just kind of like, okay, get to where like it was really playing to the ending of this movie. So eventually they had assumed that they were hearing rain at one point. And so the guy was like scrambling. He's like, "Oh my god, get like a water jug or a pail or something. Like, it's raining. We're gonna get water now. Oh my god." And the sad part of it is it wasn't rain. It was just a horde of zombies that were making their way through this entire apartment complex, just rah, rah. And so reasonably, what they were doing is they were making their way to this girl's apartment. And he was trying to figure out ways to make sounds, to have these zombies go somewhere else. This girl eventually has to take rope, and because bizarrely she just has this rope lying around. What a coincidence! And she has to go and make her way crazily through all of these zombies, attack them one by one, and just make their way through these zombies. Eventually, the guy makes it down there as well to get to her, and they just eventually end up in this other neighbor's apartment. Eventually, all seems all well at first. We have this neighbor that's really nice. He's giving them food, and it seems like they're having a very all well, nice, and great conversation. And then we realize as these people are eating, the guy's like, "Hey, do you really liking the food?" And they're just like, "Yeah, it's really great. Like, yeah, it's great to finally get a meal, you know?" And then our main character, the blondie, he falls over, and then the girl is kind of like pushing him and just kind of like checking, is like, "What's wrong with this guy?" And then eventually she realizes that they had been drugged by this neighbor, and she's like, "What? Why would you do this to us? Like, we're neighbors." You know what I wish would have happened? Reasonably, if this guy otherwise probably needed food, you would think he would have taken like a hammer or some kind of like big metal object and just bashed a hole through his entire wall to get to the next apartment next to him to see if the apartment next to him had food, or if anything, like, "Hey neighbor, do you have any food? I just had to crash through your wall to see if you had any food because I desperately need some," and this and that. Because again, reasonably, like if there was a zombie there, he probably could have figured out some ways to actually kill it. Because you would think if this guy had food in the fridge, you'd probably have like forks and knives and stuff like that. So I guess that's what he could have used if there was a zombie nearby. And anyways, so we have it to where this neighbor is zip tying these people's hands, and ultimately we're having this stranger neighbor grab this girl, drag her through his apartment complex, and this girl is slowly but surely eventually losing consciousness. And so eventually, this guy's task is he had his wife in some other room. You can imagine where this is going. This neighbor drags this woman that's tied up to his wife for his wife to get a little nibble, to get a little meal, a little happy meal, a little liver sandwich, if you know what I mean. So we have this woman thrusted into this room and then eventually is attacked by said wife zombie. Ultimately, we have our character who is consistently just going, no, 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 don't eat me. I'm bad. I'm all bone. There's no fat on me. And so then eventually our fearless, most of the time with fears, main character eventually wakes up. He eventually tries to push the guy away from the door so he can try to get to the girl because he wants to try and save her, while this woman is seemingly slowly but surely having to almost seemingly get closer and closer to getting a little zombie nibble and gibble. So eventually they have to the blonde-haired guy has to incapacitate the stranger danger neighbor, and does so, and then eventually opens the door, takes out the wife, and then eventually, like, they are now looking at one another with lingering eyes and just like, oh yeah, like kind of like the oh, thank you for saving me, this and that, oh yeah, let's kind of hug it out and this and that. But eventually we realize that this girl is now infected. So now we have to, sadly, the neighbor that was way more cautious and way more just like she knew what she was doing. Like she knew her crap. She knew how to just like get down, get funky with the zombie apocalypse. And so ultimately, there is at one moment where they are thinking about basically having to kill her. And then all of a sudden, there is this like helicopter that bizarrely arrives on this rooftop. So they scramble all the way to the rooftop, and ultimately, they run to the rooftop, and there's zombies like right behind them. And so these people, these like military-esque like people that are on this helicopter, are firing away at all these zombies, killing them, and we're like, yeah, woo, awesome, cool, you killed zombies, good for you. And basically, then these people just fly away. And I'm like, okay, that's how I guess you should probably end this movie, with survivalist like things. The funny thing about the very end of this movie, they mentioned that hey, yeah, a lot of people on social media had left these messages letting people know that they were still alive and here is their address. And so the helicopters went to those locations and picked them all up. And they basically had this big, huge, like, slogan like thing at the end of this movie, like, yeah, social media saves lives, folks. Social media saves lives. As if they were like trying to put together some kind of agenda to just like again be very like 2020, to where like, oh yeah, people, everybody needs a social media because one day it could save your life. And like, yeah, that is just ridiculous to have like this whole thing at the end where it's just like, yeah, these people posted on social media that they're still alive. We went for them, and yeah, we saved them. Oh yeah, luckily for us. Like it's a good thing that we tracked all these people down and spent all this time trying to thumb through our social media to save people. Very bizarre, odd ending to a movie. And why would everybody know to go through their social medias to like a lot of people would probably well I guess um, because phone calls weren't exactly working. I guess all the cell towers were down, but you could I guess still like do do vlogs and stuff like the guy was doing his YouTube channel while this whole entire zombie apocalypse was going on. He kept sending out videos telling people what was going on through social media, through YouTube and this and that. And so, yeah, I guess that still worked, but the phones weren't working, or the cell towers, I guess, weren't quite working with this zombie apocalypse. Because how convenient is that? Uh, I don't know. It's a fairly odd film, but at the end of the day, I think that's all I want to say about this film. It's very 2020, or it tries to be the most modern zombie movie you can try to approach. But when looking at this film, I kind of like twinge about how small of a budget it was. But when looking at it in hindsight, it's probably better than a lot of other Netflix movies, to be brutally honest. Because a lot of Netflix movies are just a lot of garbage. A lot of just like you gotta sift through to find one good film on there or one good show. I think maybe the shows might be a little bit better, but nah, it just you really got to sift through some garbage to find one decent movie that you could just say, hey, yeah, I actually enjoyed watching this film. Wow, what a coinky dink. And I know a lot of people might feel differently about it. I think there's a lot more people that would ultimately, if you surveyed them, they would probably say that they watch a lot more like Hulu, or they watch probably a lot more stuff that's much more beyond just Netflix anymore, because I think everything else is just so much more appealing than Netflix itself, because Netflix does its own content. And I think that's what's really just like Netflix is just like, yeah, like we know we're like freaking billionaires or whatever, so F it, like we're just gonna make our own content and then just like not have to pay, or in some ways have to like siphon and try to desperately find movies somewhere, and this and that. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say about hashtag alive. Uh, Ultimately, for probably within the zombie genre, not an exciting movie, but I guess as a Netflix film, it's probably I'm assuming it's a Netflix film. It's on Netflix. It might have the N on it. I don't know, but but if this is a Netflix film, which I believe it is, because I'm ignorant, yeah, via this thing ultimately is a good Netflix film, but outside of Netflix in its own zombie genre, not a good zombie film. But anyways, I'm gonna get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.